Let's bring the witnesses in so they can be sworn in at this time. The roll will be invoked, but for whatever ruling I made prior. Please be seated. We're back on the record. Cause number 940D09328, the state of Texas versus Daniel Villegas. We're ready to begin with the testimony in this case. Mr. Montoya, who is your first witness?
Raul Prieto.
Raul Prieto. Sir, you have been sworn. Please be seated. For the record, I do need your name. I need you to spell your last name for us.
My name is Raul Prieto. Last name Prieto.
Mr. Montoya, you may proceed.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
How are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you.
Could you please introduce yourself to members of the jury? Tell them your name and what you do for a living today.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Raul Prieto, and I'm currently employed here in the county as bailiff.
For a different district court?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Mr. Prieto, back in 1993, in April of 1993, how were you employed?
Back in April of 1993, I was employed as a police officer with the El Paso Police Department.
How long, or when did you join the El Paso Police Department?
Completed the academy in November 21st, 1991.
91.
Yes, sir.
And how long were you employed by the El Paso Police Department?
I was working there for 22 years.
Okay. When did you retire?
I retired in 2013.
2013. And Mr. Prieto, back in April of 1993, when you were working for the El Paso Police Department, where were you assigned, or what was your job within the police department at that time?
I was a patrolman working Northeast area, working what we call the 60s or 62 district. 60s
district. Okay. And can you describe what your duties and responsibilities were as a patrolman back in 1993?
Yes, sir. As a patrolman, mostly responded to 911 dispatch calls, and he handled any on-view offenses that we might see.
Okay. So you were wearing your uniform?
Yes, sir.
And driving around in a police car?
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to direct your attention specifically to the early morning hours of Saturday, April 10th, 1993. Were you on duty that time?
Yes, I was.
And did you receive any calls or dispatches shortly after midnight?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what was the nature of the call or the dispatch?
I believe the nature of the call was shots fired.
Shots fired.
I believe so.
And do you remember where approximately you were responding to the shots fired call?
He was responding to the 10,000 block of electric.
And sir, if I showed you some maps depicting different areas or different angles of the 10,000 block of electric, would you recognize them?
I believe so.
All right. Your Honor, may the record reflect I've shown opposing counsel what I've marked as states 1A through 1E.
Yes, sir.
May I approach?
Yes, sir. Mr. Prieto, there's going to be a laser pointer at some point that becomes convenient for you.
Mr. Prieto, I'm handing you states 1A through 1E. If you'll go ahead and take a moment to review those.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Prieto, showing you 1A, 1B, and 1C, do those fairly and accurately depict the streets surrounding the 10,000 block of electric in Northeast El Paso?
Yes, sir.
And showing you states 1D, is that also the case with this photograph or this map?
Yes, sir.
And 1E, does that depict a close-up of that same intersection?
Yes, sir.
All right, Your Honor, at this time, state would offer 1A through 1E.
No, I don't have any objections. I just want to record what they each purport to be. I have no objections.
It's 1A, B, C, D, and E are admitted into evidence.
Permission to publish?
Yes, sir.
And so, Officer Prieto, I'm showing you states 1A. Okay. How long were you a patrol officer in Northeast El Paso?
About 8 years.
8 years? Is it fair to say that you're familiar with this area?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so, Mr. Prieto, I'd like to direct your attention here to the lower left-hand portion of states 1A. And so now I'm showing, I'd like to direct your attention specifically to, I guess, Fairbanks and Woodrow Bean Trans Mountain. Do you see this area here?
Yes, sir.
Showing you 1B. What are we looking at here?
This is a little closer version of what you just showed. This is a closer version of what you showed me previously, and it shows Woodrow Bean, which is the loop, part of the loop, and I believe the lower part of that, which is electric.
Okay. And directing your attention here
Yes, sir.
to the intersection of Girl Scout and Oakwood, showing you 1E. What are we looking at here?
This is looks like a Google picture of that same location.
Okay. And I guess one question I had for you, Mr. Prieto, is I'm showing you states 1C, and I know Trans Mountain nowadays is fair to call it a highway or freeway?
Looks like a highway.
Okay. Back in 1993, was it a highway like that?
No, sir.
Okay. I'm showing states 1D. Do you see Trans Mountain or Woodrow Bean here on the map on 1D?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you show us with the laser pointer?
That would be this edition right here.
Okay. And so do you see or can you approximate the location that you responded to on the early morning hours of April 10th?
Responded to this location right here.
Okay. And fair to say, Mr. Prieto, that you could turn onto electric whether you're going east on Trans Mountain or west on Trans Mountain?
That's correct.
Okay. And what are we looking at here? Do you recognize this area?
I believe that, yes, that's the one of the old school district places where they used to park the buses.
Okay. And showing 1C, looks like they still park their buses there. Fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so, Officer Prieto, I'm showing you again 1E. Whereabout do you respond, or where do you go to and park your car?
I responded to the 10,000 block of electric, and I parked my car right about here.
Okay. Do you recall, sir, the time that the call went out, that the shots fired call went out?
I would say it's approximately 12:15 midnight.
Okay. And what time, how long did it take you to get there?
I'd say about maybe 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay. When you got there, were you the first person there?
No, sir.
Who else was there before you?
On the scene already was Officer Bellows.
Bellows. Okay. What about fire or EMS?
There was, I believe there was, yes, there was a EMS unit there and a fire unit.
Okay. What were they doing?
They were tending to a victim that was lying on the ground on the porch.
Okay. Can you show us here on States 1E which house they were tending to the victim at?
That would have been this house right here.
Okay. At the corner of Oakwood and Girl Scout or Electric?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And sir, if I showed you a picture of that house or a Google picture of that house, would you recognize it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, may the record reflect that I've previously shown States Exhibit 2 to opposing counsel. May I approach?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Prieto, I'm showing you States 2. Does that accurately depict the intersection today?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was it in the same or substantially similar form back in 1993?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, State would offer 2 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
States Exhibit 2 has been in evidence.
Permission to public?
Yes, sir.
And so, Mr. Prieto, directing your attention here to the corner house that you identified, do you see the tree here on the corner?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Showing you States 2. Do you see that same tree here in this picture?
I do.
Okay. The house, sir, can you show us approximately where you saw the EMS, the fire personnel treating a person?
It was right around this area, underneath the little porch right there.
Okay. Do you remember anything else about that? Do you remember what they were treating him for or what he looked like?
Well, he was sort of lying on the floor in a fetal position, and they were trying to ask him a few questions, but he was being non-responsive. He'd appear to be in pain.
Pain. Was he conscious or unconscious?
He was conscious.
Okay. Did you try to ask him any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. Male, female?
It was a male.
Okay. Could you give us a description as to his age?
He was a pretty young male, approximately, I would say, between 17 and 18 years of age.
Okay. And what did you do next, or what happened next?
Well, I was allowing EMS and fire to try to attend to the victim that was on the floor, and pretty much just standing by.
Okay. Did anything happen after that?
As I was standing there, I was approached by somebody who tapped me on my shoulder, and I turned over and looked at them.
Okay. Do you know if you remember where you were standing or where these folks approached you from?
So the victim was right there on the floor, and I was standing right about there.
Okay. And so someone came over and tapped you on the shoulder?
Correct.
Did you see where they came from?
No, sir.
Okay. And who tapped you on the shoulder? Do you recall?
It was a gentleman that I later came to know as Juan Medina.
Juan Medina.
Yes, sir.
And when you saw Mr. Medina, how did he appear?
He had a very flushed look on his face and a very concerned look on his face.
Okay.
And he asked me some questions.
He asked you some questions?
Yes.
What did he ask you?
He asked who was out on the floor and if he could take a look and see if it was one of his friends.
Okay. And what did you tell him? How did you respond?
I let him look, and he looked at the person that was on the floor, and he said, yes, that's one of my friends.
Okay. Did you have a conversation or did you interview Mr. Medina there at the scene?
Oh, at that point, I believe I asked him what his friend's name was because they were trying to get some, I know they were trying to identify him to find out who he was.
Okay. And was he able to provide you a name? Do you recall?
I believe he said it was his friend. I can't recall the first name, but I think he said it was Lazo.
Lazo. And was Mr. Medina by himself?
He was with another gentleman that walked with him.
Were you ever able to identify that gentleman's name?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall?
Jesse Hernandez.
Okay. And how long would you say that this interaction with Mr. Medina lasts?
Just a couple minutes.
Okay. Do you continue standing here on the porch or do you do anything else?
We walked over to about where the shade on the tree is, right about there.
Okay.
About that area right there.
And then what did you do?
At that point, I continued talking. That's why I was talking to Mr. Medina.
Uh-huh. And without telling us what he said, did he indicate to you to go somewhere or to do something?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what did you do?
I proceeded to that location.
Okay. And where is that?
That would have been across the street. And there's a barrier there now, but there wasn't one there before.
Okay. So let me show State's Exhibit 1E. You went which direction?
So I headed to about this direction here, and then I started walking along this path right here.
Okay. And what did you see?
Right about, probably somewhere about here is where I found another body.
Okay. And Mr. Prieto, if I showed you some pictures from that evening, would you recognize them?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm showing opposing counsel what I've marked as states, or I have already shown them 3 through 11 and 24 and 25. Mr. Prieto, I'm showing you states 3 through 11. Go ahead and take a moment to review those. And 24 and 25.
Yes.
Okay. Do you recognize the locations and what's depicted in states 3 through 11 and 24 and 25?
I do.
And do they fairly and accurately depict the scene on that evening?
Yes, sir.
All right. Your Honor, at this time, State would offer 3 through 11 and 24 and 25.
No objection, Your Honor.
States Exhibits 3 through 11 and States Exhibits 24 and 25 are admitted into evidence.
Commissioner Public?
Yes, sir.
After you found a second body there out here, Mr. Prieto, what did you do next?
At that point, I went ahead and notified the initial responding officer, Officer Bellows, and EMS.
Okay. And was he treated by EMS or what happened?
Yes, sir. They went ahead and checked him for vitals. And
Okay. Was he alive or not?
no, sir, it was not.
And so Mr. Prieto, I'm showing you State's Exhibit number 8. Do you see the lot that you went into that night?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Do you see the dirt area that you would have gone into that night?
Yes.
Okay. Can you show us?
What's this whole area right here?
Okay. And showing you State's Exhibit number 9. Who are we looking at here?
That's the deceased that I was able to locate.
Okay. And showing you State's Exhibit number 10. And Mr. Prieto, when you found the second individual, was he like this, laying on the ground like this?
No, sir.
How was he laying?
He was, I believe, he was turned over.
Okay. On his side?
Prone, on prone position.
Okay. And showing you State's Exhibit number 11, what are we looking at here?
That's a picture of the deceased after they tried to perform emergency services on him.
Okay. Were you ever able to identify this person?
Yes, sir.
Oh.
To walk a little bit more and around the scene, just walk a little bit around the scene.
Okay. And did you find anything?
Yes, sir.
What did you find?
Found some shell casings.
Okay. Can you approximate here on States 1E where you found the shell casings?
These shell casings were located right around this area right here.
Okay.
Well, right around here.
Okay. And so directing your attention here to electric, showing you States 3, what are we looking at here?
That is Electric Street. Right after the shell casings were located, stationed my patrol car right at the end of the street.
Okay. And what was the purpose of that?
Just prevent other cars from passing through the street.
Okay. And obviously the lot is here to the right, correct?
Correct.
Directing your attention to States 4, what are we looking at here?
That's where the shell casings were located.
Okay. And on States 1E, sir, if we're facing north on Electric or Girl Scout, were the casings on the left or the right side of the street?
On this side of the street,
Okay.
which would be on the left,
All right.
as you're looking at it.
So I'm showing States 4 again. States 5. Do you recall, sir, how many casings you observed?
6.
And were you able to tell or were you able to determine what caliber of casings that they were?
No, sir.
Okay. Did they appear to be large or small caliber?
They were small caliber casings.
I'm showing State's Exhibit number 6. Do you see the casings depicted here?
Yes, sir.
Can you show us?
There's one casing here, and the other one is right here.
And State's Exhibit number 7. Do you see the casings here?
Yes, sir. There's one here, and there's one here.
Okay. Did you pick them up?
No, sir.
Whose responsibility would have been to pick up the casings?
That would have been the crime scene unit that responded.
Okay. Did you put these little numbers or the placards on them?
No, sir.
Whose responsibility is that?
I believe that would be the responsibility of the crime scene unit as well.
Okay. Do you give direction or orders to the crime scene unit? Do you do that?
No, sir.
Okay. And so I'm showing States 24. What are we looking at here?
That is the Electric Street.
Okay. I guess at sunrise?
Yes, sir, looks like.
And Mr. Prieto, the areas here depicted in States 1E that we've been testifying about, is that in El Paso County, Texas?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Prieto. I pass the witness, Your Honor.
Mr. Spencer.
Officer Prieto, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
As you know, I'm Joe Spencer.
Yes, sir.
I represent Daniel Villegas, along with Joshua Spencer, Jake Spencer, Felix Valenzuela. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. If there's something that you don't know or you don't understand, let me know, and I'm going to reword it or rephrase it. Is that fair enough?
It's fair.
Okay. As I understand your testimony, you were not the first responder, Officer Bellows was?
That is correct.
Okay, you were the second responder. Is that correct? As best as you can remember.
He was the first one on the scene.
First one on the scene,
Right.
fair enough. Did you have a partner with you that day?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so your partner was with you in the marked police uniform?
I was full crew. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Bellows was solo?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When Bellows was there, had he already parked the vehicle on Electric Street?
I don't recall.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. It would be fair to say that at the time that the shooting occurred, whoever did the shooting was nowhere to be found. Is that fair?
I'm sorry, can you
Sure.
repeat that?
Whoever committed the shooting at the scene was nowhere to be found.
That is correct.
Okay, all right. And the purpose of you blocking off the streets at both ends is to preserve the integrity of the crime scene, correct?
That's correct.
To make sure that the crime scene doesn't get contaminated, evidence doesn't get taken out or put in that shouldn't be, fair?
Correct.
Okay. You told the jury that your best approximation as to when the call came out was at 12:15, after midnight?
Yes, sir. Shortly after midnight.
Sure. If the EMS indicates that they received a 911 call at 12:18, you wouldn't quarrel with that time?
No, sir.
So at the time that you arrived, did you already know that Mr. Lasso was at the front door of what we know as the Gorman's home?
No, sir.
Okay. How did you go over there? How was it you go there? Because the EMS was already over there?
Yes, sir.
All right. You indicated based on the on State's Exhibit number 1E, I think you told us, Officer Prieto, that right now, as it is now, there's actually a rock wall fence that goes right along this street. Is that correct?
No, yes, sir.
Now, correct. But back in 1993, it was an open field. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Somewhere past the open field, there was a chain link fence, however. Is that fair? That would run east and west? I'm sorry, that'd be north and south.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. And you said that after you saw Mr. Lasso, Juan Medina tapped you on the shoulder, who you later identified as Juan Medina, tapped you on the shoulder. And do you recall that at that moment is when you realized there may be another body somewhere, or there's a person missing?
Yes, sir.
All right. And that's when you did your due diligence and you went out looking in the direction where you were told they had been when the shots were fired. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. When you were looking in the area for the body after you found him, you also, as part of your job, you try to find any other evidence you may find. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So is it fair to say that you knew that one of the victims had run from wherever he was shot to the front of the home of the Gorhams, correct?
Correct.
All right. He was receiving first aid there, fair?
Correct.
Okay. Did you actually speak with the Gorhams at the home, Mr. and Mrs. Gorham?
No, sir. I don't believe so.
Are you aware who actually placed a 911 call?
I believe it was people that lived in that corner house.
In the house. The shell casings that were found, that you found on the street, were you aware that the Gorham's bedroom is immediately in approximation just left of where the shell casings were?
I'm not sure about that, sir.
Okay. You didn't go into the home, did you?
No, sir.
That's really not your job as a patrol officer at that time, correct?
Correct.
You were not one of the crime scene units, or you were not one of the investigators, detectives to investigate the scene, correct?
Correct.
Your real job was, after you initially see if you could, making sure that that you found the two individuals, to preserve the crime scene, and then you turned that over to the crime scene unit, is that correct?
Correct.
Eventually, the detectives went out there and you turned over to them whatever information you had as well, correct?
Correct.
Officer Prieto, you didn't make a report in this case, did you?
I don't believe so.
Okay. In 1993, there was no report to memorialize everything you had been told and everything that was fresh in your mind back then, correct?
Correct.
Now we're over 25 years later and you're going by your memory, fair?
Right.
Okay. Do you recall if you transported Mr. Medina or Mr. Hernandez to CAP, Crimes Against Person?
Yes, sir.
You did? Okay. Did you transport both or one?
Just one.
Just one. Did another officer transport another?
Yes, sir.
One of the other boys?
Yes, sir.
Actually, once you realized that there were two survivors, Jesse Hernandez and Juan Medina, you actually separated them in different vehicles so that they would not be able to maybe speak to each other, fair?
Correct. Yes, sir.
That's standard procedure to make sure that you can get the independent recollection from each one and maybe they don't try to cover each other up, fair?
Correct.
So as far as you know, once they were separated, that you separate them in the different police units and they were taken down to CAP, Crimes Against Person, on Rainer, you don't know what else happened at that point, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You had no other involvement with this case, Mr. Prieto, other than what you've told us here today?
That's correct.
You did tell us a little while ago, you told ladies and gentlemen of the jury that you went looking for evidence and you actually found, you're the one that actually found the shell casings, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is it fair to say that you also looked to see if there was any other evidence in the area where Armando Lasso was? Would that be logical?
I don't believe I had anything to do with that immediate area as far as looking for evidence was. I didn't do anything there.
Okay, you don't, I'm sorry, say that again?
As far as like continuing to look for evidence,
Yes.
where Mr. Lazo was lying,
Right.
I didn't do that.
You didn't do that?
No, sir.
All right. You did, though, make effort to locate the shell casings here, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Once you found those shell casings, you didn't look in the general vicinity where Mr. Lasso was?
No, sir.
Okay. We had first responders that were tending to Mr. Lasso there?
That's correct.
Okay. Were there any other officers there to preserve that portion of the crime scene and make sure it wasn't contaminated, or see if there was any other evidence there in the front of the home?
I believe my partner was also there. Officer
What?
Payan.
I'm sorry, Officer Payan?
Yes, sir.
I was going to ask you, okay. Is it fair to say that in your whole time that you were out there, you saw, for example, no shotgun shells in that area? Fair?
That's correct.
Because if you had found them, you would have collected them, you would have identified them and referred them to the crime scene unit, fair?
Yes, sir.
Did you check to see if there had been any shots that the house had taken any shots?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you notice any sort of a blood trail?
No, sir.
Okay. Fair to say that that area back in 1993 where it occurred was really dark.
Yes, sir.
There was no street lights that illuminated that area. Is that fair?
That's correct.
It's your opinion that given the proximity of the shells that were found, that the weapon that was used was some sort of a semi-automatic weapon. Is that fair?
Just my opinion, sir, yes.
Yeah, right. I understand that. It makes sense, I'm going to ask you if this makes sense to you, Officer Prieto, that it appeared that all those shell casings, the perpetrator who shot is the person that ended up shooting both Robert England and Armando Lasso. Fair?
That's fair.
Logical deduction, correct?
Sure.
And we know that the shell casings were found there. We also know that the two survivors, Jesse Hernandez and Juan Medina, they ran north. Is that correct?
I'm going to object to lack of personal knowledge.
Answer only, don't speculate, but answer if your investigation tends to lead down.
I don't know which way they ran.
You didn't have that conversation, or if you did, you don't recall. Fair?
That's correct.
Okay, fair enough. Is it fair to assume, though, that we know that Armando Lasso was shot twice, the gentleman that was in front of the Gorham's home, that had taken a wound in the leg?
I'm going to object, Judge, to facts not evidence at this point.
Answer only if you can testify.
Well, may I respond, Judge? I guess I'm objecting to the form of the question because it's assuming things that have not been testified to.
Ooh.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. You said you saw him, that he was in pain. Could you tell he had been shot?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is it fair to say that if a person is shooting from this angle to where the boys were over here, that one of the individuals dropped pretty much where he was hit, because Mr. England was shot in the head, correct?
Correct.
The other individual actually ran towards the first house, maybe looking for help? Fair assumption?
Yes, sir.
So that if that Mr. Lasso, when he ran towards the Gorham's home, fair to say that the threat, the person that was shooting at him, was no longer there. Fair?
Object, speculation, Judge.
Answer only if what the evidence you saw at the scene would tend to conclude that in your experience as a law enforcement official.
I could not say, sir. I don't know.
I understand. I just want you to put your logical hat on. If a person has 6 shell casings here, that person was shooting at somebody. Fair? You already said yes.
Yes,
right?
sir.
All right. And if that person got shot, who we know is Armando Lasso, that eventually ran there, if the perpetrator was still there with the gun, he wouldn't have run towards the gun. That's logical, isn't it?
Object to argument. If this is argument, and he's asking the witness to speculate as to what someone else would think or do.
Rephrase your question. Ask him if he would run that way.
If somebody's shooting at you, officer, would you run towards them?
No, sir.
So it's logical, is it not, that the threat was no longer there when Mr. Lasso ran for help?
Seems logical.
Thank you. Pass the witness.
Mr. Montana, any more questions of this witness?
No.
I'm going to have him subject to recall, but I'm going to let him go back to his judge, because I know his judge is antsy probably and waiting for you. You're still under subpoena power. I know you're here. We'll give you a 20-minute heads up if you're here back.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pardon your service.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay. Yeah. Can we approach, Your Honor?
Yes, sir. No longer available to testify.
That's correct. And then State's Exhibit 29 would be the testimony of George Gorham.
So it's Nancy and George?
Yes, Judge. So I'm offering in totality State's Exhibits 26, 27, 28, and 29.
Any objections?
Your Honor, I have no objections to State's Exhibit 26, which is the death certificate of Nancy Gorham. I have no objection to counsel reading into the record the sworn testimony. I have an objection to using as an exhibit the transcription of the testimony. I have no objection her reading into the record in front of the jury their testimony.
Response?
I believe that it is admissible at this point, Judge.
Isn't it considered a witness statement?
It is.
That doesn't go back to the jury? That's why I'm concerned.
Okay, well, but what I was going to do, and the court can decide on the ruling, is I was going to put it on the Alamo as I read along.
Not a problem.
Okay. So for purposes of the record for identifications, they'll be 27 and 29.
For identification purposes only, those will be allowed to be published to the jury. The other exhibits are also admitted into evidence to show the unavailability of those witnesses.
Thank you.
Were you going to do it in question and answer form? Or just
I am, and I'm just going to have everybody follow along as I
That's
read
fine.
it into the record, if that's all right with the court. All right. So again, for ID purposes, I'm starting with...
Mary, will you approach again?
Do you want me to take both of them? If you'll just give us just a second, Judge, to find an extra copy.
Sure.
And so for purposes of the jury, what we're going to do is, instead of reading it together off of here, it's going to be presented to you in the form of a question and answer. So Mr. Montoya will ask the question, and I will read the responses from both of the witnesses, Nancy Gorham and George Gorham.
And Ms. Butterworth, you don't have to go over there. If you guys want to share a mic and do that, that's fine, but it's your decision.
I'll just sit at the witness stand, Judge, if that's fine. Do you need to?
I don't know.
We'll say this is a first for me. For me.
Who did we call? Was it Nancy first?
I was going to do Nancy.
Ma'am, would you please state your name for the record?
Nancy Gorham,
And where do you live, Miss Gorham?
10,000 Oakwood.
And is that at the corner of Electric and Oakwood?
Yes, that's true.
How long have you lived there?
About 30 years.
Let me direct your attention to the early morning hours of April 10th, 1993. Were you up shortly after midnight on that night?
Yes.
And did you hear anything unusual?
I heard about 5 or 6 shots.
And what did you do after you heard the shots?
I started to look out the bedroom window when I heard a knocking on the door and I woke up my husband.
Did you go check the door yourself?
No.
What did you do next?
My husband then went to the front door and told me to call 911, which I did.
And how long were you on the phone with 911?
Probably 3 minutes. They kept me on the phone till the fire and the police came.
Okay, so you were on the phone with 911 until an emergency unit arrived.
Right.
How long was it from the time you first heard the shots until someone arrived at the house?
Probably 5 minutes.
Did you ever hear the person who knocked at the door say anything?
No.
Did you know the person who knocked at the door?
I recognized him.
Okay, but did you know his name?
No.
And you work at Andress High School.
That's correct.
So, had you seen the person at Andress?
Yes.
I'm on 165. Would you please state your name for the record, please?
Nancy Gorham.
Would you please spell your last name?
G-O-R-H.
Excuse me. I'm going to object to being asked and answered.
Would you spell your last name?
Gorham.
So that's like the silver?
Correct.
Mrs. Gorham, where do you live?
10,000 Oakwood, El Paso, Texas.
How long have you lived there?
25 years.
Mrs. Gorham, I'm going to turn your attention to the early morning hours of April 10th, 1993. Were you awake at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
And what, if anything, did you hear?
I heard 5 or 6 shots.
Where were you, ma'am, in your house?
I was in the corner bedroom facing the street and electric.
Facing the street? Facing Electric Street?
Well, on the side of it is electric, and I looked out the front of my house.
What, if anything, did you do next, Mrs. Gorham?
I started to look out the window when I heard frantic knocking, and I woke my husband up.
How far away from the room were you in was your husband?
About 12 feet.
And what, if anything, did you do next?
I waited in the hall.
Did you go out to the front porch?
No,
Who did?
he did.
And what did you do next, Mrs. Gorham?
I called 911.
And do you remember how long you stayed on the phone?
Probably about 3 or 4 minutes.
Do you remember the time that you heard the shots?
I think it was around midnight.
Do you remember, Mrs. Gorham, the length of time that passed between the time that you heard the shots and between the time that EMS got there?
From the time I heard the shots and the EMS, probably 4 or 5 minutes.
Did you ever hear the young man that was on your front porch say anything?
No, I didn't.
Did you know the boys, Mrs. Gorham?
I didn't look at him.
So you never looked at him to recognize him?
No, I saw him later, but not at that moment.
Where do you work, ma'am?
Andrus High School.
And did you later learn that he had been a student at Andrus?
Yes.
Mrs. Gorham, you said you heard about 5 or 6 shots. Is that correct?
And the record is going to say indicating. And so I'm just going to read that if that's all right, Judge. It says indicating.
Did you hear any more shots after that?
Indicating.
What was the length of time between the time that you heard those shots and the pounding on your door?
Oh gosh, it was quick because when I heard the shots, I went over to the window to attempt to raise the blind, and before I raised it, I heard the knocking.
Could you take a stab at an estimate?
Of time?
Yes.
2 seconds, 3 seconds?
2 seconds?
Uh-huh.
You hear the shots and then a few seconds later pounding on your door?
Yes, sir.
Did you see anything like a car or a truck or a bus or anything like that?
No, because I never opened the window.
And I guess, Your Honor, would the record reflect that we're publishing George Gorham's testimony now?
Or reading it into the record.
Mr. Gorham, would you please state your name?
George Gorham.
Okay. And where do you live, Mr. Gorham?
10,000 Oakwood.
And how are you employed?
I'm retired.
And how long have you lived at 10,000 Oakwood?
Approximately 30 years.
All right. And that home is on the corner of Electric and Oakwood?
Correct.
Let me direct your attention to the early morning hours of April 10th, 1993. Did anything unusual happen that morning?
Yes, it did. Around midnight, my wife woke me and said that she had heard some gunshots and said that somebody was beating on the door. And I got up, got dressed, and went out and opened the door, and there was a boy laying on my front steps.
Okay. Was he on his back?
He was on his back, yes.
Okay. Could you tell what was the matter with him?
It looked to me like he had been shot in the stomach, but I'm not positive.
Was he conscious?
No, he was not.
And what did you do at that point?
I told my wife to call 911, which she did, and the fire department showed up within 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay. Did the boy who was laying on your front porch say anything to you?
No, he did not.
And did the police arrive?
Yes, they did.
And did you talk to the police about what happened?
Just briefly.
Would you state your name for the record, please?
George Gorham.
Mr. Gorham, how are you employed?
I'm retired at this point.
And Mr. Gorham, where do you live?
10,000 Oakwood.
And how long have you lived at that address?
Over 25 years.
Mr. Gorham, I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 12. Could you show us where your house is located, please?
And then it says, witness complied with the request.
You still have the pointer. This being electric, or you go ahead and I'll let you sit down and move to this side. Are you on this corner or this corner?
Is this a street here?
I'm going to check on, may we approach?
Mr. Montoya, start with line 9.
9.
On page 170.
Mr. Gorham, I'm going to turn your attention to April 10th, 1993 at approximately at midnight. What, if anything, unusual happened that night?
My wife woke me up somewhere between 11:30 and 12 and said that she heard gunshots outside of the house. I was awakened by my wife between 11:30 and 12, and she said she heard gunshots outside of the house. Just about then, I heard some very loud knocking at my front door. I dressed and went and looked out a window, right there on the front door, and I could not see anybody. I then opened the door and saw a young man laying at the doorstep.
Was he lying on his back?
Yes, he was.
Could you tell what was wrong with him?
I thought I saw a gunshot wound to the stomach.
Was he conscious?
No, he was not.
Mr. Gorham, what happened next?
I told my wife to call 911, and the fire department was there in less than 5 minutes.
Did the young man that was laying on your front porch ever say anything to you?
No, he did not.
And how soon after the fire department arrived did the police arrive?
That was shortly thereafter.
Do you remember speaking with the police?
Yes, I do.
And without going into anything that was said between you, did you aid them in their investigation?
I really don't know if it did or not.
Did you know the young man that was laying on your front step?
No, I did not.
Had you ever seen him before?
No.
Your Honor, as part of my cross for that, the state of Texas has stipulated that the 911 call came in at 12:18.
Mr. Montoya, Ms. Butterworth, is that correct?
That is correct.
So that is a stipulation that this jury is to take as fact that no one is disputing that the 911 call that was made came in at 12:18. Call your next witness.
The state calls Hector Hernandez to the stand.
Is he a crime scene? What I'd like to do with anybody's, unless there's an objection, we'll get as much in until noon.
Okay, Judge.
And if you've already asked him, unless there's an objection, Mr. Spencer, we'll break for lunch and then you can do your talks, and we'll stop them at that point as you get to the meeting.
Yes, sir.
Sir, you haven't sworn. Go ahead.
Yes.
Right there. Please be seated. For the record, sir, I do need your name. I need you to spell your last name for us.
First name Hector, last name Hernandez, Hernandez.
Mr. Montoya, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, sir. How are you
Morning.
doing? How are you doing today?
Good.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury? Tell them your name and what you do for a living currently.
My name is Hector Hernandez. Currently, I'm a lane print examiner with Bexar County Sheriff's Office in San Antonio, Texas.
And Mr. Hernandez, how long have you been a latent print examiner in Bexar County?
I've been there approximately 5 years now.
Okay. Back in April of 1993, sir, how were you employed?
I was a patrol officer assigned to the crime scene unit or IDNR unit of the El Paso Police Department.
Mr. Hernandez, when did you become an El Paso police officer? Do you recall?
Yes, I became a police officer in 1980.
1980. And how long were you a police officer?
I retired in 2000, so 20 years.
And Mr. Hernandez, back in 1993 when you were assigned to the crime scene unit or the IDNR,
Yes.
what does that stand for?
IDNR stood for Identification and Records.
Okay. And at the time that you're assigned as a crime scene officer or as an IDNR officer, what are your responsibilities?
Our responsibilities then were to go out and process any type of crime scene, assisting either detectives or patrol officers on the field. What that encompasses, whether they needed a photograph of something, we would do that. If they needed something dusted for fingerprints, we would go ahead and assist that. It didn't matter what type of crime scene, but we would respond, and we were to assist in that particular investigation, whatever it could be.
And the collection of evidence?
Yes, that was part of it. We would collect evidence, we'd bring it back to the office, and if it needed processing, we'd go ahead and do that too. And also, if some of the evidence needed to be sent out to DPS for further testing, we would go ahead and package that up and mail it out to DPS for further testing.
Okay. And so, Mr. Hernandez, I want to direct your attention to the early morning hours of Saturday, April 10th, 1993. Were you on duty that day?
I believe I was, yes.
Okay. And did you have an opportunity to respond to the intersection of Oakwood and Electric here in El Paso?
Yes, that morning I was called out to assist at a crime scene at that location, yes.
Okay. And were you the only crime scene officer there?
No.
Okay. Who else was there?
When I got there, there was already Detective Raul Acosta and our Sergeant, Sergeant Feiner. They were already at the scene.
Okay. And so, Mr. Hernandez, I'm showing you State's Exhibit number 4. Do you recognize what's depicted in State's Exhibit number 4?
There's some placards on the street there,
Okay.
numbered placards. And I believe at that time it showed numbering each shell casing that was found there on the roadway.
Okay. Who put down the placards?
Detective Acosta.
Okay. And did you end up collecting those items?
Yes.
Did you also draw a diagram of the scene?
Yes.
Okay. And if I showed you that diagram, would you recognize it?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel what I've marked as States 12. May I approach?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hernandez, I'm showing you State's Exhibit number 12. Do you recognize it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and what are we looking at?
It's the diagram of the scene that night that I drew. It's got my case number on it, and it's got my name, H, and then Hernandez, and my ID number, 743.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, State would offer Exhibit 12 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
State's Exhibit 12 is admitted into evidence.
And so, Mr. Hernandez, directing your attention on States 4 to the 6 placards that are displayed, I'm showing you State's Exhibit number 12. Do you see the placards or where you recovered the shell casings from?
Yes, sir. I circled them. They're in circles, and each one is numbered. And I also, on the legend that I put there, I also have number 1 through number 6, and showing the description of each casing.
This is the legend here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And these are the casings here?
Yes.
And who took these measurements, Mr. Hernandez?
I did.
Okay. Was this scene documented in any other way?
There were photographs taken and also a video, I think.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to review the video?
Yes.
Okay. And if I showed it to you, would you recognize it?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel what I've marked as States 23. May I approach?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hernandez, I'm showing you States Exhibit number 23. Do you recognize this DVD?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize this particular DVD?
It's got my initials on it and the date that I reviewed it.
Okay. And the video that's on it, does that fairly and accurately depict the scene that night?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, State would offer 23 into evidence.
Your Honor, I have no objection to the jury seeing the video. The problem I have is that the DVD that I saw also has him giving a narrative and giving hearsay statements and speaking. So as long as the audio is redacted, I have no objections to the video portion.
Already taken care of.
State's Exhibit 23 is admitted into evidence.
Now, Mr. Hernandez, I notice here on the diagram, you have another item marked here. Do you see that?
Yes.
What is that?
That's the hubcap that was depicted in the video.
Okay. And was that photographed and collected?
Yes.
Okay, Your Honor, I'm showing Exhibit 30. And actually, before I go up there, also notice here on the diagram, you notate, can you see what that says?
Yes, it says blood drops.
Okay. And you notated that as well?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with states 13 through 16 and states 30?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hernandez, I'm showing you 13 through 16 and 30. You can review those, please.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Mr. Hernandez, do 13 through 16 and 30 fairly and accurately depict the scene?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, state would offer 13 through 16 and 30.
No objection, Your Honor.
States Exhibits 13 through 16 and States Exhibit 30 is admitted into evidence.
And so, Mr. Hernandez, I'm rotating states 12. And do you see the intersection here with Keystone and Electric?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to direct your attention here to the set of blood drops that are this way and to the left of the decedent. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. I'm showing you states 13. And it's really hard to see. Let's see. Can you see a pair of headlights in this picture?
Headlights?
Yes.
Yes, way out there to my right.
Okay. And do you see a green street sign?
Yes.
Okay. And down here towards the bottom of states 13, I'd like to direct your attention here. Showing you states 14. What are we looking at here?
Those blood drops that I depicted in the diagram.
Okay. And now I'd like to direct your attention here to the blood drops behind and this way. I guess that would be north of Mr. England. So I'm showing you states 15. Do you see those same headlights and street sign here in states 15?
Yes.
Okay. And directing your attention here towards the bottom of states 15, what are we looking at here?
Those blood drops again that I depicted in the diagram.
Okay. Showing you states. Do you see this rock?
Yes.
Right. guess the stick right here,
Yes.
showing states 16. Do you see the blood drops here?
Yes.
Now, and then finally, back on stage 12, Mr. Hernandez, this hubcap here, I'm showing you stage 30. Do you see that same hubcap here in the diagram?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez, I noticed that on the diagram, there's nothing here at the house on the corner of Electric and Oakwood. Do you notice that as well?
Yes.
Were you asked to diagram that porch or this area here?
No.
Okay. Did you go and view the porch or any blood stains there on the porch?
No.
Were you, to the best of your memory, were you ever advised that there was a second individual who had been found on the porch?
No, object to hearsay.
Do you recall if you were advised of that?
No.
No, you don't recall, or no, you weren't?
I don't. I was not advised.
Okay. If you had been told, would you have diagrammed that?
Yes.
And sir, were you the one who took the video that we watched?
No.
Who was that?
That would have been Detective Raul Acosta.
I noticed in the video, no portion of the video comes to the house. Is that fair?
Correct.
Mr. Hernandez, you also collected the casings there at the scene?
Yes.
I'm showing opposing counsel 17 through 22. Coach?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hernandez, I'm showing you 17 through 22. Okay. Do you recognize them?
They're envelopes containing those shell casings and also containing the placards that was at the scene, 1 through 6. It also has red tape on it, marked evidence, the date, and my initials and ID number when I collected it.
Your Honor, at this time, State would offer 17 through 22.
No objection, Your Honor.
States Exhibits 17 through 22 are admitted into evidence.
And Mr. Hernandez, without taking out the casings, do you recall what caliber they were?
I believe there was a 22.
All of them?
I believe so, yes.
Let me see. When you took them, did you process them for fingerprints? Did you do anything to check them for fingerprints?
Other than just visual, no.
Okay. Why not?
The surface area was small on the 22. I was more concerned with any evidence that could be found on them, such as striations from a weapon, or maybe even the point where from the firing pin that could possibly be further tested.
Okay. Fair to say that casings are the part of the bullet that's ejected after the gun is fired?
Yes.
Okay. These are not the actual projectiles that would actually hit someone?
No.
Okay. in your experience, Mr. Hernandez, as a crime scene officer, in the real world, have you ever been successful in obtaining a fingerprint from a fired shell casing?
Objects to relevance.
No.
No. And how long have you been doing crime scene work or fingerprint examinations?
Since 1986 to the present, almost 30 years.
30 years.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sir, did you yourself ever search this area here in front of the home for anything, for any evidence?
No.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. I pass the witness, Judge.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the lunch hour. We're going to take our lunch break under the following instructions. You're not to discuss this case with anyone. You're not to remain within the hearing of anybody discussing this case. You're not to discuss this case among yourselves. You're not to read any newspaper articles, listen to any radio broadcasts, or view any television programs which may discuss this case. I'm going to need you back in your jury room by 1:30. We have made arrangements for your lunch. So we can take your lunch, and so you don't have to worry about that. Please follow, keep back into your jury room. I know you're going to meet, if you have not met already, one of the bailiffs that will be taking care of you. I'm hoping the other one can, but I'm not sure what the situation is. But we will see you back in the courtroom at 1:30.
All right.
Please be seated. We'll stand in recess till 1:30.